Well, welcome back. Here we are to part 2 of our K1600 biannual service. The next thing on the list we need to check is to drain the oil condensate hose. This is a hose feeding directly down from the air box. There might be a couple drops of water in there, but most of them are bone dry like mine. If there's oil in there, you may have a problem. Next up is checking the brake lines and fittings, and also checking the brake pad wear. As you can see, it takes a flashlight, but these brakes are in fine shape. Preparing the next step, which is bleeding the front brake system, I wrap the bike as much as I can in a clean sheet I use specifically for this purpose. Secondly is to remove the cover of the reservoir and draw off using a turkey baster the old fluid and disposing of it in a container. I deviated from the manual at this point because I do not have an upper bleed nipple on my master cylinder like the older K16s do. Next up, I did not compress the pistons in the calipers like the manual called for, simply because my piston compressor is not at hand. I've looked everywhere and I can't seem to find it, and I want to show you for the sake of this video. Furthermore, the bleed nipples that were sent to me by Speed Bleeder were the wrong size. So I'm going to go back and change those and compress the pistons when I re-bleed the system off camera. Bleeding conventionally can still be done. It's a bit of a contortion, but it can still be done, as you can see in this shot. When I'm done bleeding, I'm careful not to overfill the reservoir. Some shop technicians have a nasty habit of overfilling, going beyond the max mark, thinking that that's better, and that's not always the case. Once filled, I clean the cap as best I can and seal it down onto the reservoir. And I also wipe the edge of the reservoir because fluid tends to drip out there and peel off paint around the top of the cap. Now to the back system, I first check the pad, and it too looks fine. And then, since I do have a Speed Bleeder that fits, I actually can show you how that process is. I start by removing the stock bleed nipple. It screws out fairly easily and quickly place in the Speed Bleeder bleeder nipple, which really, when they work, they are great assets to have on your bike. I tighten the nipple down and then back it out just a quarter of a turn, hook up the bleeder pipe to it, and then I move to the side of the bike where I once again wrap the area in a clean rag, and I can pull out the reservoir, clean it up a bit, just any dust that may have accumulated around the cap. I can pull the cap off and pour the old fluid that's in the reservoir into my container. And then with the cap off, I fill in with new fluid, and holding the reservoir in one hand, I just pump the pedal and it bleeds each time. I don't have to worry about opening and closing the bleeder screw. The Speed Bleeder takes care of that process for me. And once the fluid comes out clean into the bleeder bag, I top up the fluid to the right level, clean it up, put the cap on, and clip it back into the bike. Then I move back to the caliper and carefully pull off the bleeder pipe so it doesn't spray brake fluid everywhere. I tighten down the nipple with my torque wrench to about 5 foot-pounds and clean everything up. After the wheel goes on, I go on to the next item, which is the coolant level of the bike, and it's fine. If it was low, I'd have to take off the side panel to adjust it. Next is the tread depth. These tires are fairly new. Next is checking all the lighting system, along with how easily the side stand and center stand swing out. I didn't show those on camera, but that's fairly straightforward. Sounds silly, but every now and then you can catch a problem with your lights if you take the time to check them. Next is checking the suppression system. What we want to make sure is that the bike will not start with the kickstand down, and if it's in gear, it will only start if the clutch is pulled in. If it's in neutral and the kickstand is up, it should start just by pressing the button. We're in the middle of winter, so I can't take the bike for a test ride after doing all this work. So my final task is to just reset the service light using the GS911 Wi-Fi. Overall, this took me a few hours, and I really took my time. I enjoyed doing the work, and for me it was a win-win. Anyway, until next time.